Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are on day 21 of the Spellbinders Crafty Advent Calendar. So if you don't want to know what's in this window, pause this, save it to watch for later because we're going to find out. So today we have this adorable popsicle die set. This one's going to come in handy, I think, in the summer, and I can't wait to play with it. And I have a different idea from what I've done in some of these videos. So this has a bunch of different, or a couple different layers to layer together to create the popsicle. I always love when dies have layers. It gives it a little bit more dimension and interest. Then there is the popsicle stick. Those little thin pieces are some of the layers that go inside of the popsicle. So I did all my die cutting off screen. I used the Silver Treasure cardstock pack and used the matte silver for the shadow part of the popsicle and the glitter cardstock for the upper layers. So I'm going to do a technique with Copic markers. I have RV06, which is the pink, and B05, which is the blue. And then I also have a Copic blender pen. And I'm going to put the pink down first, then use the blender pen to blend out that line. Now, this is a technique that I've done many times with microfine white glitter. I've never done it with glitter paper, and I was curious how the Silver Treasured cardstock glitter paper would work for this, and it worked perfectly. I'm putting a little bit of that Copic marker on the matte silver, but it can't really be blended out because it's a non-porous surface. When I go to try blend it out with that blender pen, it really just lifts the color off. So not much of this cardstock is going to be shown. So the color on there is mainly so that in the little cracks of open spaces, there's a little bit of color and it's just not plain silver. Now you can see the inner pieces of that glitter cardstock trying to escape. I'm trying to keep them together just to make it a little bit easier and a little bit more even when I'm doing that blending. Another option here would be to just use plain cardstock and do some ink blending. I think that would work as well. I just thought the glitter paper would add an interesting and a unique texture to it. So once I have all that coloring done, I can start to layer my die cuts together. I'm using some Barely Art glue in a fine line bottle, which works perfectly for little tiny die cuts. And it also is great because you can shimmy and move things in place. So it gives you a little bit of wiggle room. I put everything underneath an acrylic block just to hold it in place while it is drying, making sure everything is nice and flat and has good contact. It also frees my hands up to work on the next piece. Though that little outline piece, when I took it off and put it to the side, it reminded me of a little girl's barrette that one of my girls had growing up. I thought it was really, really cute. So it's a piece that you could keep if you wanted to find something else to do with it. I'm not really sure what else I would do with it anyways, so I just tossed it. So the glitter cardstock here, I've got a piece of silver that I'm cutting down to 4 inches by 5 1/4, and then a piece of white cardstock that I cut down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Now, had I thought ahead of time, I could have cut this mat down and then cut my popsicle pieces out of the center. The white cardstock would cover it anyways, and this is a technique that I use, or something that I do regularly, just to make those specialty cardstocks go a little bit farther, but I hadn't thought about it ahead of time. I want that coordinating, or that mat to coordinate with my die cut. So I'm going to use that blue Copic marker just to color around the edges. Could have done the pink as well, but I already planned to stamp the sentiment with the pink. So for the sentiment, I'm using my Misti stamping tool, and I'm bringing out the sentiment stamp from day 19. I'm using this stamp that says "Have a sweet day." I thought that worked really, really well with the popsicle. Putting that where I want it on my cardstock, and I placed the die cuts for the popsicle so that I knew that I was going to have proper placement. And then I'm stamping it with Picked Raspberry Distress ink. So I chose the pink color to stamp with and the blue color for a matte, simply because I didn't want the blue at the bottom of the popsicle plus a blue sentiment. Just personal preference. Neither way is right or wrong, but you could always swap them and have pink around as a matte and use purple ink for the sentiment if you wanted to. With all of those layers done, we can start assembling everything on the base of the card. The Copic on the glitter paper takes very, very little time to dry. Alcohol ink in general starts to dissipate very quickly, so it dries really quickly, so there's really not much drying time to it. So there's very little worry about having wet ink and having to worry about transferring it. With all of those die cuts glued in place, I can put my acrylic block on there and let that sit for just a couple minutes while that dries. Then I can add the little bite piece from the top of the popsicle, glue that in place, and let that dry for a few minutes. And I do let it dry a little bit longer than regular cardstock just because the specialty cardstock has coatings on it, so it takes a little bit longer. For a little bit of extra detail, dimension, and some shine, I'm using some glossy accents just kind of on the first top third of the popsicle, just to kind of make it look like it's melted a little bit. It's one of those details that when you first look at it, it's not very obvious, but when you tilt it in the light, rather than having the glitter texture from the cardstock, you see the glitter plus the dimensional shine on top. So I'm going to make it so it looks like it's dripping down the popsicle, and then let that dry. And I let it dry for probably a good hour before I touch it again. I want to make sure to leave it nice and level. And you can see that as it dried, it went from that cloudy color to nice and clear. And I love the extra detail that gives. This is such a fun card to create, and I love this sparkle that the glitter paper adds to it. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed creating or watching me create with today's die set. I'll see you tomorrow and we'll find out what is in day 22.